And we are back. So, long time no see, guys. Last stream was something like third week of January. I probably should have checked that before going live. But basically, what it comes down to is I had a lot to get done outside of streaming, and I really got into the mood to do a various projects that are just personal stuff, not really for the internet. So basically all of February was taken up with that. Second week of January. So yeah, we've been about 2 full months because it's the second week of March now without a stream. So that's the quick rundown. The quick rundown is just that I had a lot to do outside of stream. The less quick rundown is what we'll be talking about today. So a few of the projects that I did off of stream, I decided while I was doing them that they probably could end up as videos, so I did record some videos of that stuff. I have, it's one of those things, if and when I post those, they will get posted. One of these difficult things where I'm realizing that obviously I have not been putting out videos like was my goal for the past year. And editing videos, I came to the realization, or at least I think I came to the realization, it's one of those things you can always get inside of your head. But I think the reason I haven't been posting videos, and it's so difficult for me to post videos, is that I did the math and basically I only watch with my eyes 1 in 20 videos, about round numbers to make things even, that I load up on YouTube. I listen to like literally 95% of the content. Again, 1 in 20 round numbers. About 95% of the content I consume on YouTube is just me listening to it. And again, may just be inside my own head right now, but that seems like a pretty good justification as to why I have such a hard time editing videos, because I just intrinsically do not see the value in it, because I do not consume really video content, which is a bit ironic. It's just one of those things. I do stream, obviously, and all the stuff that I do here is physical stuff, which means that it actually needs a visual component to it. So it makes sense for the stuff that I do on stream and in theory on video to be video as opposed to being audio. But at the same time, again, outside of the maker and fabrication stuff that I watch online, that's basically the only stuff where I actually stop to watch the video, because that stuff, again, needs the video, whereas the other 95% of the stuff that I consume is all information and, along that line. It's all stuff that doesn't actually need a video component. And again, this is just me justifying why I have such a hard time editing video. Again, may it be entirely inside my own head, but at this point, it's the only theory I have. I would like to get more videos out on this channel, like actual videos. You would think that short form videos would be easy, but I don't know. I'm just having a hard time getting the shorts up even to begin with. I did post over that time a few things to Printable, just projects that we've done on stream that I finally got the things out for. It's just they do not have the video component to go with them, which was, I assumed, part of the deal. I'd assumed that I'd be able to, start it on Printables was the idea, was the concept here. Get it posted on Printables, and then, okay, now that I have it posted on Printables, I can do the video. I already have a lot of stuff either recorded and or photos taken in order to post onto Printables. Therefore, all it is just slap it all together, slap the B-reel, so to say, together with some voiceover, and then, one of those things I can even just embed that into the Printables thing, easy peasy, and even that has not happened. So that being the case, we'll figure something out. We're going to figure something out. As for the other projects that I was alluding to, the one project that I'm really looking forward to actually doing a video on is, so I'm going to call it Project Stereogram. It's actually not a stereogram. It's literally not a stereogram, but that's the closest phrase that I have to refer to it. And I think it's one of those things. I did a whole bunch of, well, by a whole bunch, I mean like I did maybe 3 hours of trying to Google and Wikipedia link my way to the correct term here. Um, it's something along the lines of persistence of motion or persistence of vision video. Basically, what it comes down to is you can take, and I found one example of this. This is what kind of booted it up, kicked it off for me, and to do the research in order to actually put it together. But you can take pure static and actually create a video out of pure static, because the human eye will be able to differentiate what pixels in that video are moving, even though it's all just noise. So again, that's one that I'm pretty excited to put out. And it should be relatively short, and that would have to be pretty short because the idea, the concept behind the video is that I would do the entire video as pure static. And that would involve encoding the whole entire thing. And I've written the encoder to do it in Python because that was the easiest to slap together, especially because I had to do a whole bunch of experimentation to see if I could make it better, or even just figure out, can this work in different ways? Not necessarily making it better, but can I make it work in different ways? And it was just so much easier to iterate in Python with the CV2, computer vision 2. So unfortunately, the point of that being is that it runs super slow. So I have no desire. I considered this. So I've been looking for projects to do in Rust just so I can say that I program in Rust. I've done a few hello worlds in there, so to say, just a few playing around and minor programs just to get an idea about the language. But this would totally make sense. This video encoder would totally make sense as a Rust thing. The problem is that I'm literally going to do it for like a 5-minute video and then never touch the thing again. The idea and the presentation is very cool. I think it's awesome. It's just really one of these really interesting things. It's just that you would never do more than one video with this. Like I take that back. I could see, just because people enjoy different things, I could see a bunch of people going, oh, this is the coolest thing in the world, and we're just going to like create this whole entire genre of static videos. I can entirely see that as a thing, right? And all of a sudden, for those people, then encoding these videos would happen more than once. The problem is that, again, the amount of time that it would take me to write a video encoder in order to encode this, in MP4 to begin with, and I did not see many. I think I saw one library that looked like it might work just to encode into MP4 after I've gone and done all the modifications to the video that are required in order to actually make it function as desired. So it's one of these things that just getting all that up and running in Rust would take so much longer than it would take for me to take the code I have already written in Python and run it to encode a 5-minute video. So it's one of those things that just doesn't make any sense to do for this to be my project that I was going to do in Rust. My quote unquote large project I was going to do in Rust. So even though it would run, a million times faster in Rust, there's just no sense to it. I could try to rewrite it in C, but again, and by try, I mean it actually, because CV2 is available as a C library, C++, but I'm pretty sure it's C++. Regardless, the point being is that the fact that library is 1-to-1 to the Python code, basically, and I wouldn't really need to change anything, I could rewrite it in C pretty easily. It's just, again, for the amount of time I'd be saving myself on the encode, it's not really worth it, I may as well just run it in Python. It may take, let's say, 2-3 hours to encode, but then I'm done, right? Like, I'd have to rewrite the code in C in order to save, let's say, 2 hours, but I'd have to use those 2 hours. I'd have to have the code written in less than 2 hours in order to save any amount of time, right? So again, that as well doesn't really make sense, unfortunately. So, next up, that is the one project that I'm done that I am looking forward to just posting the video, putting the video together for recording and etc, posting. So the other small projects are not really all that interesting, and I will say the one interesting project that I kind of enjoyed doing was an SQL to Obsidian translator. So part of all these projects that I have been doing over the past month and a half has involved cleaning up a bunch of really old code that I haven't touched in like close to 10 years and getting that running again. It's one of those things. It's a lot of code that was borderline running. I had made some modifications for, and then realized that I probably want to just rewrite a whole bunch of it all together. And that was not really worth doing at the time because I wasn't really using the code. A lot of the code dealt with databases. So that's where this whole entire thing, SQL to Obsidian, comes in from, is the taking these old databases that I have and mapping them out. I was doing that using a flowchart program before. So I believe it was labeled as flowchart previously, but it's just the last one I was using. The last one I was using was Draw.io on Google. And Draw.io, unfortunately, not unfortunately, I swear about 8 years ago, again, I haven't touched this code for like 10 years, about 8 years ago, they were like, oh yeah, you're going to have to migrate all your stuff off because this app is just plain going away. It was linked into Google Drive and it was just plain going to go away. You were never going to get it again. And later on, after I had gotten that email, and it's one of those things, I was like, okay, you know what? Whatever. I mean, I don't use this stuff really that much. It's been 2 years at that point since I touched this stuff. So I didn't particularly care. And when I went back into Google Drive, sometime later, I realized that, it just plain Google Drive did not recognize this file type that was saved on my drive. It's not like the file went away, right? Because the file is my file stored in my drive, but the ability to decode it and to display it went away. Well, fast forward to about a month ago, and I realized that actually Draw.io is still available. You just got to go through a couple different things, and then you can actually reopen those files again, and it's no big deal. But that whole entire situation prompted me to find an alternative, and at work, I had taken a database and dropped all the SQL into various files, and Obsidian gives you this really nice graph view. So that was the impetus, was using external programs is not really useful. Obsidian is external program, but point remains is that even if I don't have Obsidian, I at least would have this all in markdown files, and then if need be, I could write a new program to display it, right? I could use whatever I want to create the GUI and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the premise. I got that done. That is up on my GitHub, GitHub/Adamant Life. It's not complete. It's not 100% complete. I still have to do, at the very least, commentable expressions and views. I actually did not implement those yet, but it is working for the most part, at least on the databases that I ran it on. So feel free to check that out. I will not be doing a video on that though, which is how I was starting this conversation. And the reason is because frankly, the code is just plain too simple. I'm using SQLglot, which is, I'm assuming, based off of Polyglot. I'm assuming that's where they got their name from. It's an SQL parser. It parses it into a tree, and then you can go ahead and handle that tree in code. So since they did all the heavy lifting for me of parsing the SQL, all I had to do is run through and then decide how to take the tree they gave us and parse that out into files, which again is just pretty straightforward and really comes down to preference. So again, won't be doing a video on that, but you can check that project out at the GitHub. I had a project back in December. I was trying to get it done before Christmas, and then I was trying to get it done before the New Year's, and then I was trying to get it done before like the second week of January. And it just, the problem is that right at Christmas where I was going to get it done, everything went off the rails and I just plain did not have time. And then the project I did a whole bunch of, during that week between between Christmas and New Year's. I say I did a whole bunch, but I spent maybe another 2 or 3 hours going over the circuit I had made for it. It's an electronics project. I had gone over the circuit so many times because I was like, I can't, this has to be something I screwed up. And I'm just not seeing this. I'm breadboarding out an alternative, and the breadboarded version is working exactly as it was working before I soldered it to the perf board. And the perf board I've gone over like 15 different times. And finally I realized that it's actually a set of wires got shorted out that were already glued down to the physical part of the project. And in order to fix it, I basically got to cut everything apart again, which is an absolute nightmare. I had checked all the joints prior to gluing it down, and at that point, nothing was sorted out. But evidently shorted out. But evidently, in the process of gluing it down, somewhere I've got literally 30 wires. I mean, maybe even more than 30 wires. Might be like 60 wires here on this project. Somewhere in there, at least 2 of the wires are shorted out. So that is why I basically just did not do anything with the project. And it's honestly sitting on a table right behind me right now, taking up space in my very small amount of space I have to work here, which is kind of annoying. But I'm pretty sure at this point, the reason I'm even bothering to mention it on stream is because I'm pretty sure I am just plain over it at this point, in the sense that, okay, I'm done crying about it. I will go ahead and cut the stupid thing apart and get it fixed. The biggest problem with it, the biggest nightmare with the situation is not that I got to cut everything back apart, but was because I was in a rush to get it done before Christmas. I had accidentally ordered the wrong parts, which made the project 20 times more difficult than it needed to be. But I decided to do it anyway because it was interesting. I decided that because it was 20 times more difficult than it needed to be, that made it more interesting. That made the project more interesting because it was not as straightforward as it could have been. And at this point, once I get it back apart and fixed, I will be doing the more simpler, however you say that. I will be doing the simpler way as well at this point because I'm not under any kind of deadline, and I'm just, again, all the bad emotions are gone at this point. I'm fine to just keep on going. So that's that situation. That does mean, obviously that I unfortunately will have to spend like another $30, but that's the reason that's part of the reason. Again, part of the reason was that I wouldn't have it done by Christmas, but the reason that I didn't have it out by like midway through January was that I really didn't want to spend the money on the cheaper version, which again would probably be about another $30, because it's one of those things, money doesn't grow on trees, But at this point, I'm committed enough and I'm over all the headaches of it that I'm feeling all right with dropping another $30 to have both versions get done. So that is that. The next project that was not going to be an on-stream project. It was going to be a video project. I still haven't done yet, though, is I wanted to try out Closenet. And it's one of these really interesting things where it randomly popped up as an ad, and I ignored it for like 2 or 3 months. And over those 2 or 3 months, it just kind of grew on me, and I was like, you know what, we'll try this out, whatever. So the idea here is that I'll do a video of the Cloisonne basic kit thing that I got, right, from the ad. And then if I decide I like it enough, we'll probably do one more freehand, you know, I will design the whole entire thing, Cloisonne art project. And that will be another video. Again, that probably won't be something I do on stream. That will probably just be another video. I might consider doing it on stream, depending on how quickly this kit goes. It's one of those deals where basically you take a drawing reference, all right, and then you glue down. In this case, you glue down. It's one of those things. I was reading up on the history of it, and especially based on one of the videos I saw of traditional Cloisonne, specifically from Japan, just because for some reason there's not a lot of information on older ones. But my assumption had been that previously they would have soldered down the wire to a metal base. That was my assumption, and then I actually could not find that verified anywhere, except for this one Japanese video that I found, which was a bit weird. It made sense to me that the wires would be soldered down. Cloisonne, I guess I should have said this from the beginning. Here, you know what? Let's turn the camera on. I've had the lights on for forever because I figured I'd eventually get over to the, over to the board, but I'm just making sure I didn't accidentally shove the board, and I did while I was sitting here talking. All right, cool. Board is back in position. So back over to the board. Or over to the board at any rate. So. Here we are. Basically, Cloisonne is, you have a palette. Not a palette, a canvas, so to say. It's a material. It doesn't necessarily need to be anything in particular, which is the whole entire point of modern Cloisonne kits. Craft kits is what I probably should be calling it. It's more of a craft is the things that you'll see online today, as opposed to traditional art pieces. So you'll have a medium here. You can have a reference picture. Most of the things I've seen, like even the traditional Japanese version, right, they'll actually sketch out something on here. So they'll sketch out with a pencil something, okay? Some design, something that looks nice. And then they'll take, and it's one of these things, you're going to see me erasing here because I don't want to mix my colors, but they'll take some medium, okay? Let's say gold wire, let's say silver wire. The ones in the kit are actually gold colored aluminum wire, as I found out from my research. They'll take some medium and they'll put it over top of these lines that they drew, okay? And let me just connect this because this will make more sense. And once all these wires are connected, as you can see, if I extend this out to, the edges here, all of a sudden I have this divided into containers. And again, this is wire, which means that this is, raised sections. And then at that point, what you can do, and assume that this edge is also a raised section, okay? At that point, you can drop colored liquid, and evidently it's like a sand type liquid paint, okay, down into these areas, and they can't get out. So it basically sits there, and then I'm under the impression that it can dry out, but more importantly than drying out, right, is you take another enamel, a spray enamel in this case, and you put it over top. So once it's basically dry, you cover it up with spray enamel, and now you have this nice, picture with all these different colors, and it's kind of got this nice, I'm going to say 3D aspect to it. It's not really super 3D, but I honestly find it more appealing than paint in certain aspects. Obviously, with painting, you can do a lot more texturing and a lot more, like you can use the brush strokes, you can use different methods of getting the paint and layering the paint onto the canvas, right? You have all these options with painting. So it's not really fair to say that I like it better, because I can definitely recognize the value in the other ones. But for me personally, because it's kind of this raised embossed feature on the art piece, I don't know, it just feels more tactile to me, is the point that I'm trying to make here. So we'll be trying that out. That's the general aspect of how that works. And again, that will just be, unless the kit version goes super quick and dries out super quick, then that will be a video in both situations. Otherwise, if frankly the kit version, I find out that these sand paints dry up relatively quickly in order to then coat them in enamel. The enamel, I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, it's actually been a couple months here, because it was actually early January when I got the kit, and I still haven't put it together. But point being, if I recall from my research from before the kit, I believe it takes 24 hours for the top coat enamel, the protective coat enamel, to dry. So obviously it wouldn't be able to finish off in a stream, but we could at least do an on-stream painting, etc. Layout and painting. So that would be another project I'm looking at. Also, just for the record, as you can see, back of my phone has Painter's Take on it. I dropped it. We will talk about that story when I do the actual video, but the glass on the back broke. Yes, it is inside of a protective case. No, that did not help. And I looked online, and first off, so I used to have actually insurance on this, but then they dropped the insurance. They said, we're not offering that anymore. Sorry. So, okay, whatever. It's one of those things. The phone's old enough that I probably should have dropped the insurance anyway. It's just one of these things. I don't plan on spending a whole bunch of money on a new phone anytime soon. So that's why I was keeping the insurance just in case. However, point being, is I looked at videos for repairing it, and as it turns out, repairing the back glass on the case is actually not that big of a deal. Where'd I put it? There we go. So yeah, I got a new black back glass rather, and I will be doing a video replacing that. Probably just gonna be a short. It's one of those things you can go online and see plenty of other people replacing the back glass, so it's not, a super interesting or unique situation, but I figured it'd be okay to post anyway, just because I find it interesting that it's really not that difficult to do, and it seems like one of those things that lots of people would be hesitant to do themselves. So that is that situation. The next thing, I'm trying to figure out whether or not I want to go here next. I was going to save this for the end. Actually, yeah, you know what? We'll see. I'll wait at least one more because I did recall something else I was going to do. So about 2 weeks ago, I figured, you know what? It's already in March. I probably should get back to streaming. And first off, obviously, I said we were going to do this case for the Vice pieces. I really didn't want to come back to streaming after a month and do just another storage case. We've done quite a few of those over the past several streams. So, and furthermore, as part of one of my projects, I had to get, that is my wire cutters. I had to get a snap ring kit. And by had to, I mean, I 90% had to. I honestly maybe could have gotten away without using it, and it was part of a repair. So it's one of those things. The part that I had to take the snap ring off of, technically speaking, it was okay. It didn't necessarily need to be taken apart and cleaned out, but I wanted to, while I was repairing the whole entire thing, take it apart and clean it out. And on various projects I've done, not having a snap ring, not being able to use snap rings, has actually been a limiting factor. So it made sense to me to get a snap ring set, but that is another thing that will need a case. And along those lines, I figured rather than just doing a regular case, I was thinking of designing a case system, because one of these deals, most people just have a pegboard, right? And all your pliers and whatnot, pliers, wire strippers, etc., 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 just go on the pegboard, and it makes your life easy. I do not have a pegboard. I do not have room for a pegboard. So I do, however, have shelf space. So I was going to make a stacking system where I could clip them together. And I think I still am going to make a system whereby I can make a relative outline of interlocking cases and then slide different wire cutters, strippers, pliers, etc. into those cases and use that as my storage. That way it's all nice and together connected. And if I ever do get room for a pegboard, I can go ahead and include just a slot in this case, just a hole in the case that then could slide onto a pegboard. That way I still have the case available if I need it. Otherwise, it's sitting on a pegboard like normal. So that is a project. I don't know if it will be the same project as this, same stream as this guy, as the Vice parts. We will consider that. It's one of those things. It may take a bit longer. However, sometimes it surprises me. It seems simple enough, honestly, that it seems like maybe I could have the whole entire thing designed in an hour, in which case we could also do the Vice parts. But we'll see what happens. I probably will do that first, do the case, the whatever you call this shape, this general plier shape holder case thing system. I'll probably start with that in a stream, and if the stream ends up being super short, like an hour, then I'll just go, okay, you know what, bonus time, we'll do a quick case to store all this stuff in. So that is that. But like I said, the point being is I didn't want to do cases when I first came back. So an interesting idea that I was thinking of was a sponge press. So we have somebody that stays here for certain parts of the year where I'm living, and they always insist on squeezing out the sponge, which I'm cool with. Like, it's one of those things. I worked in a restaurant for a while. I get it. I normally do give the sponge at least a little bit of a squeeze before I put it down after I'm done doing dishes. But I was thinking it'd be nice to make some kind of sponge press that sits in, the little divider of the sink. They make sponge holders that do this, a little case right here that comes up and hooks onto the edge here. They make these already. I was thinking about making one that, one of those things, put a hinge down here, put a plate right here, and then, you can drop the sponge in, sponges in here, and then close it in here, give it a little squeeze against the center part here, and that gets all the water out, and then you can let go. And I was going to have a little wire latch, so you put the sponge in, you flip the latch up, squeeze it, and then you can let go, and the latch will keep it open in this, where exactly as it's showing right here, just halfway open. That way the sponge isn't getting compressed for like 20 hours straight until you do your next batch of dishes. So that was the idea. The biggest problem, so my first idea with that one, okay, which I was kind of excited for, was I was going to take a piece of 3mm aluminum on my Carvera and cut out some pieces to make a grill, right? So cut out a grill from here and take these pieces that got cut out, turn them 90 degrees, and physically attach them, with screws or whatever, to an identical mating piece, which would be the other side of the press, right? So now you have a grill on each side going perpendicular. It made sense at the moment, and I was kind of excited for that. And then I sat there and seriously went, I don't think I've ever seen any presses like this that actually work in this manner. Because now you've got the sponge, right? Here's my sponge. And I'm kind of crisscrossing it like this to squeeze it out, which means that I've got these pockets here that aren't actually getting squeezed. And that didn't really make sense to me. So that's why at the start of March, when all of a sudden I had this idea to do this stream, I didn't end up streaming because I realized that as interesting as an idea as it all was, it didn't really make any sense. Mechanically, for squeezing the water out of the sponge, it didn't make any sense. So then there was the idea of, okay, well, I guess I just take 2 pieces of 3mm aluminum and, just put some grooves in them, just put some mating grooves in them, like a Foreman press, an actual, oven, not oven, but, grill, these things where you put your burgers, your patties or whatever on here and you squeeze it down to get the juices out. That idea. But frankly, that was kind of boring. I looked at it and I was like, that's super boring at that point. That actually, that doesn't have the little flair panaz of the other one where you were actually taking the waste material from the I'm using grill in 2 different senses here, right? So when I said grill the first time, I'm talking about gates, okay? So on storefronts and whatever, when you see the rods going across the front of the store, okay, especially in malls, this is called a grill, okay? The second sense of the grill was, like I described, the thing you cook on. The grill press more specifically. So anyway, just to clear up that little bit, because I've said grill like 5 different times and meant it in 2 different ways. That first time actually had something interesting where I was using the waste pieces to make the rest of the piece. This other way, where I was just grooving it out like a typical press grill, didn't make as much sense. So, the next idea I had for this is I was thinking about those sponge mops. And sponge mops have a sponge down here, okay? But they also have these rollers. And I looked it up, and on the ones I saw online, they had 2 sets of rollers. But basically, you got a handle right here. This is not the broom handle. Here's the broom handle, okay? But you have a separate handle right here that you then push these rollers down, and they roll and squeeze out all the water out of the sponge. I thought that would be pretty interesting. The problem is that in my design here, where I'm taking advantage of this ledge here to hook over, I had a hard time seeing a way to incorporate the rollers. Definitely on the backside didn't make any sense. I couldn't think of any way to really incorporate them on the backside between this ledge right here, which is your sink, and the hook. But even on the front side, because I want to press in this way, it seems difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible. It just seems difficult to get the roller to go down this way when you're pressing this way, right? So that's why that one didn't happen. Now, could we simplify the design such that this is a rack, let's say, that travels only halfway up, and then you put the sponge in, and then you press, instead of in, you press down, and this is maybe wedge shaped, so now as you're pressing down, this roller gets more and more deeper into the sponge. We could do that, but it's one of those things again. Didn't really see a clear way through it, and was not as interesting. It was actually interesting. I'll take that back. It was actually interesting, but I didn't see a clear way through it. And it's one of those things, as the first stream back, it seemed like one of those streams where, and you guys, if you watched the other streams before, you'll see this every once in a while where I go, oh, I totally know how to do that. And then half the stream, a good hour straight, is, That is not physically working out the way it was working out in my head. So I didn't want that to happen with this one. That's why it did not happen. Well, that's why I did not come back again first or second week of March and do that stream. All right. There probably are other projects that I could talk about right now, but we're going to go ahead and just move on to all this crap that I have sitting over here. So, in case you do not recognize this, this is the macro keypad, the Stream Deck as I was calling it, that I was putting together forever ago. I can't actually remember how long ago it was. So this went through a number of iterations. And the iteration that we were going to end up with was this kind where you can see this hole in the back right here. So the stack of Steam Decks. So basically, sorry, let me back up just a moment because I'm realizing that it was long enough ago that I should probably remind you how the whole entire thing worked. The idea was that you'd have a base station with keys on it, but then this would be infinitely extendable, was the idea. Practically not infinitely extendable, but it would require no effort to extend this to add more keypads. Okay? And I was stacking them up like this, one above the other. Originally, the first design we had was, let's see how I draw this. I guess like this. Okay, so there's the bottom keypad. And then the second keypad, I probably should have drawn this a little further out, but actually, you know what? Let's look at this from the back to make it easier on myself, okay? So this is the front this way, okay? Front this way. The next keypad would slide out, and it had these runners, kind of like drawer slides, that would allow it to slide. Actually, that's right. It slid back. It did slide back. Now that I remember correctly. It slid back towards the back. That way you could have your keypads here and your next keypad up here on top of this runner, this slider that slid backwards. The problem with that design is that the printed material just did not want to slide that well. And for as thin as I was trying to keep it, it flexed too much. As you put these sliders together, they just wanted to flex too much, and I was trying to fully 3D print it. So since that one was not working out, what we did instead was we took this stack right here and stack. We put a rod through it, okay? And this way, the next one could just swing out of the way like this, and you could take another one and swing it over here, you know, and that would allow you to fan it out. So from the top view, something like this, there, not exact geometry right here, obviously, because they all need to go through this hole right here, but that was the idea. Two reasons why this never got assembled. First reason is I designed this pad first, this PCB first. This, as you will recall, came out of me realizing that you actually did not need any kind of special material, any special machinery in order to route your own PCBs. I realized that you could literally just take any cutting tool, in my case a Dremel, and Dremel out the traces basically. And since this is a very small project with very low requirements, it actually didn't matter what the traces really looked like. It would still function. So that's where this project got its origin. And I made this up, and there were two problems with this. The first problem is that nothing here is precisely placed. So I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this on the camera, but if I take, for example, this as a reference, this is obviously a straight edge right here. And you can see how, if I go around here, things are not at all straight, which meant that putting it into a perfectly straight 3D printed thing became difficult, and that includes these mounting holes right here. So I did some fiddling to try to get this together, but the second problem is that, as it turns out, with keyboard design, these keys can't be soldered down to the board, which again, I did this the very first thing because it was part of my whole entire, hey, you can make PCBs at home, no problem. So I made this PCB first, and as it turns out, this top plate actually needs to go onto the PCB before the keys do. So I actually would need to desolder all this in order to get this plate down, which does not fit onto these keys to begin with because the keys are all crooked, and then put the keys on and then solder the keys. In theory, that's how you would have to do this. So that is why I never actually finished assembling this project. So suddenly, this past weekend, round about Saturday, while I was trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to stream, because I wanted to, it was, again, end of the first week of March, and I really wanted to get a stream in, I suddenly had a bit of inspiration, which was, I've got a Carrera now. The PCB, doing a new PCB and having it actually work correctly and everything be square is now perfectly easy. Perfectly easy. I'm sure something will go horribly wrong while I'm trying to do this. But I can also do the case out of aluminum. I bought a bunch of this aluminum from Makera when I had to buy a couple of extra pieces that I didn't realize that I would need, a couple add-ons. So one of those things, in order to get the free shipping, I was like, you know what, we're going to add some material on. And as it turns out, it actually was cheaper. And it's one of those things I'm realizing at this point that at certain angles, the light really reflects off of this aluminum plate. So I'm going to move it out of the way. So anyway, the aluminum plates and a few other materials that I picked up actually were cheaper from Makera than they were from Amazon. And a lot of other places I looked, I actually compiled rather is the correct word. I compiled a list of possible vendors for different materials. And I actually found that Makera, for certain sizes, was actually a good bit cheaper than those other vendors that I had access to, either locally or, again, via Amazon. So I ended up picking a bunch of that material. And like I was saying, I can take this aluminum and turn it into a case now. And since it's aluminum rather than 3D printed plastic, it should run smoother. Now, all that was on Saturday, and from Saturday to Sunday, I did a whole bunch of different ideas and research. And let me swap you over to this gallery viewer. There we go. So this is what I was whiteboarding. Basically, I looked at my CAD in Fusion, and I found that I only needed right here 4.5 in between the top of the top layer and the bottom of the keycap. In other words, right below, and not keycap, bottom of the key, the switch, bottom of the switch. There we go. That's the correct word. So I only needed 4.5, and then the PCB is 1.5 to the bottom. This number gets a little silly. This basically on this side, I'm just saying if I'm using a 5mm piece right here was the idea, then 4.5 here, an extra 0.5 millimeters overlapping the PCB, and then the PCB is 1.5 millimeters thick going out the bottom. So the PCB would only be sticking out 1 millimeter out the bottom plus the solder, but all that would fit inside of one of these 5mm plates that I just showed you that I got from Makera. So all of a sudden this was lining up, right? And furthermore, I've been trying to, so back when I did the add-on for my Makera that we did on stream, right? My original intention was to anodize that socket piece that I made, the cover piece that I made, in order to match the Makera. And I never actually did that. I forgot about that and was in too much of a rush to put it together. So these things I would then have the opportunity to anodize because I wanted to experience the process and see how it turns out. And we could, grab some dye and make them a nice cool color. So I was really hyped about this. What you're seeing here is two different ideas of how to do it that I came up with. One obviously is just mount the PCB exactly like I did originally with bolts into the top case. And then the PCB is hidden between the two edges. Over here, since this was sticking out 1 millimeter out of 1.5 millimeters, I was like, well, at that point, may as well drop it all the way down and have it go into these sides itself. It's an option. I'm not saying that it's necessarily the same way to go, but the next part is that I need to get electricity between the two sections here, and B, I need some kind of motion system to connect them. So I got this idea of what if I integrated those two ideas? What if the rail that moves these sections back and forth and allows for multiple of them to be present at the same time, what if that had wires integrated into it? So I grabbed an 8mm piece and I kind of looked at it and I was like, okay, well, if it's 8mm and then I got my, what do you call them? I got my, bearings. Boy, brain totally farted right there. I got some bearings here. I can't use those spots I'm down for copper wires. I'm seeing 6 here, but this is just a freehand drawing. This is not dimensions, so we can discuss that. I was like, I don't know. We'll see about that. But maybe we grab another piece of 5mm material, and instead of having a round, rod that we're using here, maybe we use flat pieces, just flat rails, and run the bearings along the flat rails. It's an idea. We can consider it. The benefit of this is that all the wires are on the outside. We can consider it again. Let's see what things look like. So I hopped over here and I quick sketched this out and I went, oh, wait a second. 5mm, right? Compared to an 8mm rod, which is just my default, all of a sudden, the method that we're using to move these guys is way larger than the actual plate itself, right? Well, all right, what about this guy over here? This plate right here, I wouldn't have 4 on each side. So assuming this is evenly spaced, that means I have a little area off the edge right here. I need a little padding right here. And then we have this, so that's 9 different segments, right? The blank spot, wire, blank spot, wire, blank spot, wire, etc. Gives us 9 sections. That's 0.55 of a millimeter per wire that I can fit in there, which is technically okay. Technically, for the amount of current that we're pushing through here, 23 to 24 gauge would actually be okay. The bigger problem, and this right here, this little black line that you see right here, is literally me trying to get 0.5 millimeter as a reference. So the problem I realized is that there was no way that I was going to get a cutter into that area. I do not have an EDM machine. If I had an EDM machine, maybe I could do that with an EDM machine. But I've just got a Carvera at this point, and no cutter is going to do. At least as I think no cutter is going to do 0.5 millimeter in aluminum, right? I haven't really actually looked at it. Might be able to do that on PCB, but not in aluminum. So once I saw this, I then popped up here and went, hold on, let's see what we're actually looking at. And I literally did 5 millimeters right here just to, okay, you know what? This, which looks all nice and spacey right here, right? These drawings looks like there's tons of space right here. Again, I am terrible with this kind of stuff. This is what this actually is. This at 1-to-1 scale is this big. So that's where we're at with the project thus far. I did take down some measurements based on, how we're designing the PCB right now. This is what we're working with for sizes, but that's kind of irrelevant because all this is it's really small. Now, next thing to mention, while we're trying to figure out how exactly we're going to connect these in a reasonable way that doesn't look ridiculous, because again, 5mm sheet, let's go ahead and hop back to the camera really quick just for a reference. Camera. Again, 5mm sheet. This is what we're talking about right here. So this is the area that technically that fits in. So you can see that is the amount of switch that is, up until the top plate. So we've got the top plate, and then the PCB would go at the bottom of this, which again, as you can see, overlaps slightly, about 0.5 millimeter, with the metal, and then otherwise would hang down past that. Again, we can modify this a little bit as per the second drawing that I was showing you, so that it's completely below. But point being is that is a very small amount of area. Where I was going with this is that for this project to work out, actually, no, that's not where I was going with this. I was going to circle back to the whole entire, what exactly, for a plate this thin, how exactly do you design the motion transfer off of this? And back to, I was going to integrate the wires with the motion thing, which actually I didn't really explain, so let me just explain that one really quick. The idea was just to have brushes. So if I have this wire right here, which is connected to, embedded in whatever I'm using to transfer this, okay? All I have to really do, because we can interrupt the power here. I was looking at it, and interrupting the power to these plates, if it does get interrupted, is not that big deal. But we can have little spring-loaded, quote-unquote, brushes, that are pressed up against it and slide along the length of the wire. And in theory, so long as those are properly, springy and making contact, that shouldn't actually result in any loss of power. But even if it does, point being, is that shouldn't be a problem for the mechanism itself. It should still function just fine, even if it loses power for a microsecond while I'm sliding that out. And that would be the only situation in which it would lose power, because once it's slid apart, once we take this and slide this somewhere else, right, then it's just sitting there, then it's not really doing anything. Maybe, and again, this is part of the whole entire, how exactly do you get this set up? Maybe for as thin as the metal is, there's a bit of deflection that may cause it to lose power. But again, it should not be, for this particular application, that big of a deal to lose power momentarily. So, the other thing I was going to say, which I interrupted myself on, is originally, as you saw, and I keep on putting my markers away and I really shouldn't, I was starting out with a 5mm plate, and then I was milling away the inside, was the idea, right? That is kind of an unnecessary loss of material. Now, for as small as the plate is, you're really not losing that much material, right? At the end of the day, that is relatively small amount of material. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that perhaps instead we make this in multiple pieces and then fasten or weld together multiple pieces. I have been wanting to try the low temp welding sticks, brazing sticks, whatever you want to call them. I mean, fact of the matter is it really is more brazing than anything else. I think it seems like it to me that it's more brazing than anything else. But I've been meaning to try those out. It would make more sense if I had a 1.5 for the top plate, which is what the top plate currently measures right here. This top plate is 1.5. So 1.5 millimeter plate, which technically speaking, I believe it was it a 1/16th plate technically is what I'd end up with, just looking online at what I could pick up. So 1/16th plate here, and then maybe some 3 millimeter plates cut right here to form the outside edges. And looking at it again, depending on how we do the motion system, it's either going to end up as what's the best way to draw this? I was going to draw it in 3D. It's just one of those deals. It may end up either as a 3-sided box or a 4-sided box. Actually, I guess I don't. I guess I just do that. That. One day I'll learn how to draw. All right, and then the bottom piece. And we can kill that. Yeah, so either it ends up as a 3-sided box or a 4-sided box, right? I guess I've got a lip right there, technically. Anyway, I'm not sure which. It really depends. But it would involve cutting all these pieces at a 3 millimeter using that top plate. We can use the Carvera to make sure all my lines are in place, right? To make sure that everything actually lines up. And then for the anodizing process, regardless of which way I do it, I've got to plug these thread holes because either we're going to have thread holes going into the PCB or, well, going from the PCB into the edges or from the PCB into the faceplate. And anodizing would add thickness to that, or at least change the thickness. It's one of those things. I was reading up on it, and some people say that the etching would remove threading, okay? But the anodizing would add thickness, so I'm not entirely clear what matters more, what would screw up the threads worse, either etching and removing material from the threads or lumping material back on when you anodize it, which is oxidizing the aluminum. So I'm not sure which will play a bigger role, point being, but in order to protect the threads, evidently what I can do is I can use sealing wax is what I saw. They also had plugs of different materials, I saw people say, but for as small as these holes, these screws are going to be, if I'm using 3 millimeters, you know, if this is a 3 millimeter plate and I'm tapping into this, then this is going to be like a 1.4, well, I was looking at 1.4 millimeter hole right here, bolt right here, screw. 1.4 millimeter screw because of how little material I have on this 3 millimeter plate. And I just don't see myself getting a plug in there. However, I could see myself getting a piece of wax super hot so that it's super liquid and then just dropping it in there. And then when the anodizing process is done, then you take the piece, you heat it back up to melt the wax out, and you're good. So that's the plan on that, on how to keep the screw holes properly, Alternatively, and this one's a little sketchy, I'm assuming that post-anodizing, so if we go the route where the case is brazed together, I'm assuming that I could probably drill and tap afterwards. I'm assuming. I mean, obviously the oxidation layer may have a different toughness to it, but I'm not expecting it to be tougher than a high-speed steel drill bit just to break the surface. And then once I have the surface broken, then I can take the tap and tap it, right? Makes sense to me. So that's the deal there. Now, am I being super optimistic about that, yeah, sure. The bigger problem again, and the reason why I'm not streaming this design right now and doing a talk right now instead, is that the motion system needs to be nailed down. I need to come up with a good idea before I actually go live with that on stream that I'm pretty sure will work. Again, I have streams every once in a while. Every once in a while. I'm coping. I have streams where I go in thinking that something's going to work perfectly fine, and it ends up not working perfectly fine. That does in fact happen. That is a thing. But I would like to hopefully avoid that this time. So, once I'm 95% sure, which, you know, for a normal person would probably equate out to 30%, but once I personally am 95% sure that's going to work, then I will do that stream. Otherwise, I will be working on other projects, and if I get a good idea for an easy-ish project that I can do on stream, you know, that is not these stupid cases, you know. I don't want to do the cases as the next stream. I'll do the cases as a stream after that. Cases will be 2 streams from now, okay? Promise. Once I have, if I have another project before I get this sorted out, then I will do that one instead. So it would go other project, cases, keypad, in theory. Again, one of those things, I have a bad habit of pushing things off. So if it gets really difficult and I really have a hard time deciding on how to make this work, that might take a while. But I am enthusiastic right now about this because it's interesting. One more thing about the keypads that I totally forgot about till right now. The top plate and the soldering issue is fixable. And it is fixable using sockets, using push-in sockets, hot swappable sockets. It's a word, okay? It's a word. You can read it, I'm sure. There are 3 kinds that I've researched so far. I don't think there's any more than 3 kinds, but there's 3 kinds. The first kind is Hot Light. I'm not looking while I'm writing here for the record. I think it's called Hot Light. Okay. These are expensive. Okay. Frankly speaking, they're expensive. These ones are designed as a press fit. So they have a press fit portion at the top, and then they have your typical spring-loaded socket thing down here. Okay. The next version down would be Milmax. These guys do not cost as much. These guys are a lot simpler. They just have a top lip. So this goes, let me grab green. This one is press fit into the PCB, which is why it's more expensive. This one is just a socket, and that sits on top of the PCB. And then, another color, you solder that in. Oh no, I got green in my orange. All right, so that's the first 2 kinds. The third kind, which is about the same as Milmax, is, I'm just going to call them generic sockets, all right? And actually I should call this, what should I call this? External sockets? I think I had a different name in the notes that I was taking for my research, but basically how this works is you got your PCB, and this guy actually sits, so one of these things, these guys right here, you got hole, generally speaking. So for these 2 guys, you have 2 separate ones like this, whereas this one is a full plastic piece that you plug into the PCB and then solder down to ideally pads. And I think it is on this side. I drew this right here, but I think it's on this side. And this is not always compatible with directly with every single keyboard, because you would want to solder these parts to pads here. Let me draw the solder in here. So instead, if you can't solder that down there, what they'd have you do is they have you run jumper wires to other pads instead. So that's how this third version works. Since we're doing a custom PCB right here, this version actually would be perfectly okay. The only reason I would hesitate on this one is because, as you can see, you got all this material, all this extra plastic casing on the top side of the PCB, which eats up space. Again, I will refer you back to 5mm, right? That's a concern. So that may kick. Let's push you guys out of the way. Just to draw the whole entire design here, that may kick the PCB down like this. All the way out like this. Because again, as I said before, the socket, or the switch ends right here. So this switch ends 0.5mm from the bottom here, which means that this plastic part starts 0.5 but is, let's say, 3mm thick. So that's the problem with this guy in our design. It's not necessarily the pads that are the problem, it's the fact that it takes up so much extra space. This guy is the most ideal because he presses in flush with the PCB, so nothing changes for us. Also, this guy's ideal for another reason that I have not mentioned, which is... I'm just going to grab another color now. This has multiple sizes. So this has LEDs and switch sizes for the LEDs and the switches. This guy only has switches, and this guy only has switches, which means that these LEDs either need to go away and not exist for this to work, or we've got to do something else. The something else could be that we do a mix. So we take this guy for a switch. I'm sorry, not this guy for the switch. This guy's the expensive guy. We don't want to use this guy if possible. This guy for the LEDs, because they have a size for the LEDs, and this guy for the switch. Again, discounting this guy right now because this guy, even though it's about as expensive as the Melmax, just takes up too much space. It seems like if the design changes and we get more space, then the design changes and we get more space. But it seems like we will need that space, and therefore it will not be viable. So that is how we get around this problem here. So the PCB can get attached directly to the top plate, and then after we get the top plate attached, we can plug the hot swappable key switches. And again, the key switches themselves are not necessarily hot swappable. It's this mechanism right here. We can plug these in afterwards. Again, and ideally with the with the LEDs. So that is the other thing. Wow. My throat is starting to go because I have not done this in a while. We're only at an hour and 15 minutes. The other thing to point out here is that our switch, right? The problem here, and the reason why the top plate becomes an issue, is that this lip right here gets in the way. we could actually just as easily just open the top plate up, right? And it is what it is. I mean, it's one of those things. It's not like the key's going anywhere, right? So the switch could just be soldered on, and the opening for the top plate could just be bigger. That was an option for this guy. The reason I never did that for this guy is just because everything else is so crooked that there were just other problems that didn't solve. So technically speaking, we could do this, especially because, again, your keycap is gonna be more or less like this, right? Your keycap is probably going to be covering up this extra space that we took out for this lip that goes around. Right? That extra lip that goes around is probably smaller than the keycap itself, so you're never going to see it anyway. You're never going to see this gap in here. Does that give more opportunity for dust and stuff to get in there? Yes, it does, which is probably why they generally don't do it. Probably why the top plate is there even to begin with, because the top plate keeps out for the most part. It's one of those things, look at your keyboard. I'm sure you got plenty of crap in your keyboard, but the top plate, in theory, probably keeps a lot of that stuff out. So that's why it exists, but we don't have to jump through so many hoops. We could solder the keys down and be fine. Just clearing out the extra space so that the top plate can go over top this without interfering, I was going to say interfering, and then I was going to say interfacing instead, but it's actually both, right? Interfacing with this lip and interfering with being placed over top this lip. So that is an option, again, but the reason why I would prefer hot switch keys even in that situation, even though it costs more money, is because you really can't beat the versatility of, oh, this key doesn't seem to be working anymore. I'm just going to pull it out and put another one in there, right? That just seems useful to me. Repairability is something that if you've been watching the channel, take into consideration pretty often. Serviceability, more specifically. So, even if we change the top case, it still makes sense to me to have the hot switch swaps in place just for ease of upkeep. So. Oh, there we go. I figured there was at least one more project that I could address, and it just occurred to me as I was getting ready to end the stream, and that is the lighting. Now, the lighting actually today is behaving itself, which is weird. The few times that I tried to record video, or not tried to, I did record video over the past month and a half. The lights were going off and on, blinking, and as you can see, actually, because I have the camera right here, right, the light is not actually positioned correctly on this side, which is why you'll notice the difference in color in my arms, because this light is shooting straight down basically at my arm, whereas this one is actually shooting, let me get in frame, way over there. That's where this light is pointed. This light right there. That light right there is pointed way over there. And therefore, again, you can tell the difference in the shadow, because the shadow is a lot darker over here because it doesn't have the light pointing straight at it like this one over here. Point being is that is a project that I need to get fixed. My plan with that, I haven't really talked about it on stream. Actually, so I kind of did. I had said previously that I was giving up on this after we had done a design stream, and as it turns out, I did not really give up on it. So I was talking about putting a rack on my computer to hang stuff on. So in a previous design stream, we had created a frame like this. There we go. On my desk. And this would have gantries. That was the idea. Okay? And this was kind of annoying. I didn't particularly like this design, which is why I said we probably weren't doing that anymore. Instead, because I've done a bit of woodworking at this point, what I'm thinking, or what I'm planning, I should say, because I actually have prepped some of the material, is and this is going to be a side view here, doing this and creating a wooden arc overhang right here. What the heck do you call that? Awning. Basically a wooden awning right here. I'm probably still going to have, I'm not sure if I'm going to bother with a movable gantry or if I'm just going to have a rod just go straight across for the camera. Because again, one of the biggest problems is that camera needs to be in a very specific position in order to have a good view of the desktop right here. And furthermore, I would like, so fun fact, I looked at cameras again and I remembered, oh, that's right, that's why I don't own a camera, because it costs like $1 million to own a camera, a good camera for YouTube. A good camera for YouTube is expensive, man. Expensive. Not expensive as my Corvair, admittedly, but that's a machine that does work. The camera may also do work and may also be part of the business, but you know, that's besides the point. Again, I will refer you back to the conversation that we had an hour and 20 minutes ago at the very start of the stream, where I talked about how much I value video. Anyway, point being is we'll have this awning. We'll have a way to suspend the camera. I may replace this, what do you call it? What the heck do you call this? The microphone holder. I can't remember what the heck it's actually called at this point, but it's one of these doohickeys, okay? Boom arm thingies. I may replace this for the mic with an overhead microphone holder coming off of this. We will consider that. The reason why I would do this is because it's not that bad right now when I'm just drawing on the whiteboard, but if I'm working on stuff right here, you know, if I let me grab something actually useful. All right. If I'm using something like this Dremel press right here on the desktop, the microphone is literally an inch, and I probably just bumped it right there, so my bad. But it's literally an inch from where I would want to press this Dremel press, which again would show up better in the camera if the camera was right above the desk instead of pointed at an angle as best as I can get it. But the point being is that I have no space to work like this on the desk with the microphone right here, which is why it would make sense to have the microphone further up and out of the way. So I have a good 2 foot, 3 foot, whatever, of space above my desk where the microphone is not interfering. So again, the boom arm on the microphone will probably end up getting replaced by just an arm hanging down here. And then this awning that I'm calling it can also just have strip lights, not necessarily built into the awning, but I'm just planning on making cases of strip LEDs that then can be attached up onto it, you know, on little brackets, so that I can have them always in the same place and coming from overview of the desk. So here's the desk. Actually, you know what? This is not how I was planning on doing this. I was actually planning on having them at the edges. So let me just draw that correctly. So here's the awnings. And then here's the desk. And technically speaking, that goes behind the desk. My bad. So anyway, at that point, the LEDs could be placed here, here, and maybe I run another strip back here, you know, on a what do you call it? On a strut or something. Not this, obviously. This would be more expensive than it needs to be. But on a strut or something like that, run across another set of LED strips. That way I'm getting light, you know, in all these directions towards the desk, as opposed to right now where everything is just going. I drew that at a bit of an angle, but right now I've got my monitor here, center part of the monitor, and then this monitor right here, which has the camera, is literally like this. This is literally my setup right now. And the lights, yeah, they are. The lights extend about yay far over top the monitors and then are pointed down like this. And you can see how this is a bit of a problem for lighting, as opposed to this, where the lights get set up. They're always in the same place. They're coming from both higher up and pointed further down towards the desk. And the other idea I was having was also considering having some more lights on the bottom part down here. So the awning obviously extends up over here. So maybe putting some light strips down here to get the light across the desk as opposed to down like the rest of these. So anyway, whole entire point of this talk is that I have the material for this prepped, just needed to be cut up and assembled and attached. The attached part may or may not be super difficult. I'm planning on back at my desk. Let me draw the desktop in really quick. There. Let's change this. And there. So that is what the back of my desk looks like right now. Actually, this one is also like this. These are solid. There you go. So I'm sorry. It's a bit difficult. I'm hoping it's less difficult than it looks, but basically, if I put the awning right here, right? The awning leg right here, my plan was to bracket it. Just take a metal bracket and bracket it onto the back of the desk. The problem is, and probably onto the back of the desktop too, but that would have to be a lot narrower. I only have 3/4 of an inch right there. So that's less of a bracket and more of a little strip of metal holding it. But further down, I'd have to go into this wood here and this edge right here. And this is all MDF, so it's not ideal. I'm considering, and again, I preferred it along the edges like this, especially for the lighting purposes, but I am considering doing a cantilever version instead, where the awning the awning comes down to the floor and then has a leg like this, and then that would be sitting straight on the floor. I would probably still want to fasten it to keep it from going anywhere, but most of its weight would be off of the desk, and therefore I wouldn't need serious bracket here into MDF again. Let me remind you, into MDF in order to fixture it. Instead, it would be sticking underneath the desk, which again, it would have to come in a little bit. So on this side, so this side over here is that side over there. It's to my left right now. So on this side, looking from the back, there is a shelf right here. It can slide right underneath this shelf. No big deal. Over here, I have a pull-out side table thing, which it would have to fit in between the wheels here. which means that it's coming in probably, my guess is, without getting onto the floor and looking at it, my guess is probably 6 inches. So it'd be 6 inches into my desk. However, as you can probably tell by this drawing, because this actually is pretty relevant, pretty relatively correct spacing, scale, etc. words. I do have more space on this side of the desk that I don't really use because of this pull-out section, as opposed to over here where this is a cubby over here. So the midpoint of the desk is really like right here, let's say. Am I looking at that correctly? I think it is. Yeah, I think that's right. So the whole entire desk is actually right aligned. Okay. Actually, sorry. Left aligned. Yes, I did mean to have the arrow that direction, but this is left because we're looking from the back. Back view. There we go. So left aligned based on the back, which means that even if I lose 6 inches over on this side, because this side of the awning has to be in further, even at that point, it's not actually going to be that bad because, again, everything is already shifted to this direction to begin with. So that would be the last project. And that project is probably getting done sooner than later because we are officially in spring, which means that it is not freezing out anymore. And I would be doing this at work, and up ladder where I do my woodworking is honestly not that bad temperature wise, even in the winter, because it is up high where all the heat accumulates. But at the same time, it is just plain a lot nicer to do in the spring as opposed to winter. It's not, point being is that even if it's warmer than down ladder, it's not that much warmer. If it was freezing in the shop, it would still be, pretty cold up ladder. So that is the point. So it will be getting done sooner than later. What's the point there? And I believe I am officially out of topics to talk about, unless I wanted to mention that I have tried some Blender at this point. It's one of these things where I really should dive into Blender and get a lot better at it, but the motivation is not quite there, and also Blender is hard. So there's that, and also I have other projects, so that is also that. We'll see what happens. I guess the last thing to mention that I didn't really talk about is not actually, it's one of those things, it's just a talking topic, which is why I should probably get out of the way here. It's not anything that is going to come to fruition on the channel, but one of these deals where I don't have the room for it, but I did spend an unnecessary amount of time investigating getting a Voron. One of these deals where my Prusa is fine. It's fine. But I can't do any interesting material, and it is technically slower than the current average speed of printers in today's day and age. The Prusa i3 Mark 3S, i3 Mark S, Mark S Plus, whatever the heck it is, ye old bed slinger is actually technically below average speed at this point. The technology has improved. I don't have space for a Voron, but every time I see a Voron, a Core XY printer, I go, man, I wish I had a Core XY printer, and I wish I had a way to print, more interesting materials like ABS. Yeah, it's a shame I don't have the space and I don't have the money, right? If I had the space, I might actually drop the money. The biggest problem is that I don't think I can really justify the spending on it based on my current amount of 3D printing I've been doing recently. That does come from a place where I just spent the last month and a half basically spending all my time programming, coding, instead of designing. So as we get back into doing streams and doing videos for the channel, that may change. My perspective on that may change. May be like, yeah, you know what? So long as I'm streaming, I am printing enough stuff to justify it. But again, the bigger problem is just I do not have space for another printer. I would have to replace my Prusa at this point, and at that point, in order to have space, at that point, I just taken a completely useful and functional printer out of the equation. Like, it's just sitting around not doing anything, which just feels bad, you know? And what I'm getting from the exchange is just less print time, and even at that, it's one of these things I'm reading up on the Voron, having read up on it, you know, and people are like, oh yeah, I preheat my chamber for 30 minutes before I start printing. And it's like, well, I mean, if the print is 30 minutes longer but takes an hour less, then we're only saving like half an hour worth of print time, right? Yes, I am getting ABS for that half an hour, but let's face it, I mostly print in PATG. I would like to print in ABS just because it is in theory better, but if I don't have to, if I don't have an actual serious reason to be printing in ABS, then, you know. So, anyway, yeah, that was a conversation that I just felt I had to have at some point, and again, today is the appropriate time to have conversations like that. Would be nice to have a Voron have a Core XY printer. Cannot justify it right now. The fact of the matter is that before I get a Core XY printer, I really honestly should consider getting a resin printer. One thing that has not come up on the channel, because I only did a little bit of it last year towards the end of summer. Towards the end of summer, I got a forge, a little electric forge, and I was melting down scrap aluminum, and I have been collecting scrap copper, and the scrap copper, one of those things, copper is expensive, so that's why I've been collecting it. I don't know what projects I actually would use that for, but the scrap aluminum I can do all sorts of stuff with. And a resin printer would be very, very useful for doing resin burnouts. If you've holy cow, I've watched him a fair bit, and all of a sudden I'm blanking on his name. What the heck? Oh, hold on, let me get to actual YouTube, not my studio. 1 second. Is it Dave's Garage? Not Dave's Garage. Dave's Garage is another guy who keeps on popping up on my feed, and I actually still haven't, so my bad, Dave's Garage, but you keep on popping up my feed, and I'm not particularly interested, unfortunately. No disrespect, it's just, not what I'm interested in watching at the moment. Garage, resin, burnout. Okay, now I'm getting cars. Good bunch of men. Wow, I really wish I wasn't casting. Paul's Garage. There we go. I knew it was somebody's garage. Yeah. Paul's Garage. Whoops, sorry about that. Anyway, I've watched his stuff for a long while now, and I've been meaning to get into the whole entire casting thing. I have also watched a couple other people, but other people don't do the resin burnout printing, investment casting. That's the correct term for it. Other people that I have watched haven't done the investing casting. They've just been doing sand casting. sand mold casting. So, anyway, I've been meaning to get into that, and a resin printer would be a lot better for that than an FDM printer, like significantly better for that purpose. So, also, I do play a good bit of D&D, and resin printing is a lot better for D&D figures than FDM printers. Yes, you can 3D print FDM D&D figures. I have printed quite a few of them, and the best ones are definitely the bigger ones. Give me half a second. Let me just go ahead and, because I have a box here that's just been sitting here because we haven't been playing D&D in person. And heck, I mean, a lot of these figures that I have sitting in here I actually printed back on the Ender 3. So even on the Ender 3, you know, one of those deals really doesn't look bad. I mean, it's funny because now that I've seen much better prints, I can see quite a bit of banding here. But one of those things, when I first got my printer, I printed a whole bunch of characters. And again, the bigger ones look just fine, you know, at a glance. Now, if I painted these, they look significantly worse unless I put a whole bunch of effort in. And that is the point of resin printing, is resin printing, you know, this guy right here. Resin printing would give you not only better detail, so if you look at this guy's face, and it's one of those things, hard to see on camera, but his face is pretty featureless because of, you know, one of those things. Just FDM printing limitations at this scale. Anyway, point being is that for D&D figures, I much prefer resin printing to FDM just because of quality. And also, back to investment casting, resin seems extremely useful and extremely interesting. So, there's that. I do have actually a couple casting, just sand casting projects that I've been meaning to get done. I have two of them that I can think of off the top of my head that are relatively simple and I should be able to bang out. It's one of those things, everything looks more difficult than, I mean, everything looks easier than they actually are, but hopefully the geometry is simple enough that it should not actually be a big deal. And it would be easier to sandcast than it would be to machine, is the point. So that is one more thing that may be hitting the channel, or not maybe, it 100% should be hitting the channel this year. Again, end of last summer, I have video recorded and just sitting around of me me melting stuff down for use, but I haven't actually done any sand casting. I have the sand for it, just haven't done any sand casting. So, yep, I think that is all the topics I could possibly think of at the moment. I'm saying that and I'm giving myself a second just because one of those things, I've thought that 4 times so far. And I just keep on coming up with more stuff. So, Nah, I think I'm done. Okay. I'm looking around. I'm not seeing anything else really speaking to me. So, that should be it. Yeah, I mean, in terms of when the next stream will be, we will see. Now that I've done at least one stream, now it should be a lot easier to get more streams in because I've broken the ice and gone back into it. And I've wrapped up a lot of the other projects that I was talking about at the beginning of the stream. You know, other miscellaneous personal projects are 95% wrapped up at this point, so I have time to spend on stream instead. And it really just comes down to, as I said before, how quickly I sort out this whole entire macro pad situation. Oh, one other thing. Yeah. All right. You see, I'm doing it. I keep on rambling and finding tangents when I should be ending the stream. you guys should be familiar with this by right now. One other thing that I would kind of like to try, but probably is not worthwhile, is on the keypad, the macro keypad. I'm using an is it a micro mini? I think it's a mini. I think I'm using a mini. Arduino Mini on it was the original design. I've considered, although again it may be a bad idea, swapping that out just for the microprocessor. I've seen a video on it, and the video wasn't even coming from an Arduino perspective. It was actually just a guy that does electronics, and he was talking about you add this microprocessor to anything and you can instantly turn it into a USB device. You know, that was his sales pitch. Fact of the matter is that I recognized the microprocessor that he pulled out as, I'm 95% sure, the one that's on the Mini. Again, assuming that I've got that correct and it is the Mini. Is it a Mini or is it a micro? Anyway, point being is that I recognized it as the same exact microprocessor that's on that board, right? So in theory, I could decouple the microprocessor from the board. The only thing about that is that I don't really get anything in this particular application from that. That doesn't really get me anything that I need, any benefits that I need. So there's no real point to do it. It was just an interesting idea I thought up, mostly because, again, back to our 5mm situation there, the base station was always intended to be larger in order to house components. But the second you get rid of the whole entire Arduino form factor and just go down to the microprocessor, all of a sudden that allows you to have a much smaller space on the base station that connects everything else together. So that was an idea, but again, I don't see enough benefits really. The only benefit I'm seeing is just the space saving. So that probably won't happen. I'm just throwing it out there as a mention. So now I think we are finally finished. So as always, guys, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great and wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're in the world, and I will catch you next time.